Okay, everything seems to be happening faster and faster and more intensively. We can't, although I think we should mention the fact that the British Parliament voted to join the campaign, the
Yes.
bombing campaign against Islamic State, which I think is more a question of who's in the club and who's out not in the club than anything else. But much more important than that, I think, is what's happened in this country and the reactions to it since this last
In San
mass
Bernardino,
shooting.
the suburbs of Los Angeles,
Um,
right?
and, yes, and I thought it was very interesting that there's been so much
Hmm.
reaction to it from really from the top down, far more than has happened with previous mass shootings, as far as I can remember. And what the president said about it, I don't remember the actual words, but something to the effect that this is the only country in the world where this sort of thing happens. He actually said that, and uh, it's interesting to try to work out, which of course nobody, as far as I know, has done yet, why it should happen in this country and not other countries, and just exactly what the reasons might be for it happening now, since the access to guns hasn't changed since 1789, as far as I know. So why didn't it happen
You
before?
mean
Why does it
now
happen
as
now?
in 2015, or now as in the past 25 years or so?
Is, well, why, why has the number of mass shootings been, I think, increasing over the last few years? And certainly, it was
Hmm. Oh,
very
yeah. Yeah.
uncommon before the second, the 19th, 20th century, and it gradually got more. It happened more and more in the latter part of the 20th century, and more since
Well,
the beginning of this century. So that really needs, and of course, for us, the big question is, does it have anything to do with globalization? Since it's happening, it seems to be increasing as globalization progresses.
well,
So that's,
I
I
would
think, what
say
we have
two
to
things. I don't
consider.
want to get on my soapbox, but I've long believed that there's a culture of younger people in this country, maybe people like under the age of 35 or so, who have vast exposure to these video games, which are realistic recreations of violent shooting uh, episodes. And I think that somehow works to inure people against actual violence. But before I go down that road, let me just point something out. You might not have seen this. The police released this information about an hour ago, saying that there were something like 22 pipe bombs in the home of the two people, the husband and wife, or boyfriend and girlfriend with a 6-month-old daughter, who were
Yeah.
killed by the police, who were the perpetrators, and something like 2,500 rounds of ammunition found in the house where they lived. Now, the man
Yes.
had been to Saudi Arabia a year ago and returned with his Pakistani-born wife, who he met over there apparently, and then brought back here. Um, I think, and the officials are saying this, that they're saying it may be a link to terrorism. Now, I'm very curious as to why ISIS has not said anything yet, because I mean, I would think ISIS would have jumped on this almost in real time, saying this is one of ours. But if there is a link now, this is a lone wolf, and this is somebody who is an ISIS.
Well, it certainly is
Oh,
strange that they were so well prepared. But it's even stranger, it seems to me, that they should
right,
have made the
right,
attack in the place that they made it, because they could
right.
have done far more damage in plenty of other places. And why go to a place where people are
Yeah, it was
what is it?
definitely
The
it was
learning
definitely a
differences? I forget
limited
what. Yeah.
target-rich environment, so to speak. But I mean, there was a connection. The fellow had been a $71,000 a year, a former $71,000 environmental inspector. He inspected municipal and commercial swimming pools for levels of contaminants and things of that nature. And apparently, he went. They were having the county of San Bernardino was having a holiday luncheon at this location, and this fellow went and he apparently
Yeah.
exchanged
Yeah.
angry words with somebody, then left, then came back with his partner. With
Yes, I saw that. So it may actually have
possibly
something
so.
to do with
Yeah,
his
yeah.
relationship with the city. Yeah. But as far as the terrorism link is concerned, it is somebody who grew up in this country, right? Not somebody who's been in involved in things in other places and then come here in order to
I think he's a
perpetrate some sort of
naturalized citizen. I
terrorist
think he's a
act.
Saudi, but he's been here for quite some time. I think I read something like 10 or 12 years. So I would agree with what you just said. Yes.
Um, so let's think about this question of whether it has anything to do with globalization and whether that means that what's happening now and seems to be happening more and more is likely to increase as globalization increases, because presumably nothing is, unless we're hit by a meteor or something like that, nothing's going to um, uh, stop the rate or even reduce the rate of globalization, because population growth is, although the
Hmm.
rate is diminishing, it's going to continue to increase for the next several decades, and people are moving around more, and that's going to increase the rate of globalization as well. So the big issue is what that might have to do with this sort of behavior. And I think in order to understand that, we have to accept the idea that the way society works is changing. However, um, the fact that it's happening here and not in other countries which America is very closely related to and which have cultures that are not that different from America, and countries that are as industrialized as America is and as globalized as America is, and in fact even more globalized in some cases. That's not an easy question to answer. Now, some people would say that it's because guns are much more accessible here than they are in other
Hmm.
countries. But if you want a gun, you can usually find one. And there's plenty of ways. I mean, anybody wants a gun in a country that has armed, um,
Well, they found guns in France. I mean,
what should I
those
say?
perpetrators did. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I don't think while Obama today or yesterday said we were very careful who we allow to go on a plane and what they should take with them. Anybody here, whether we would allow them to go on a plane or not, can go into a store and buy a gun. Um, and that obviously is something that needs to be controlled better. However, I don't think that
There's something else going
explains
on. You're right.
what's
You're right.
happening.
That seemingly only happened
Uh,
here to the degree that it's happening. I don't know what it is. Whether it's some social
yeah.
disaffection, social isolation that goes on that permits the individual to feel empowered to lash out to reattain his or her rights, or I don't know what it is.
And then what happened in Paris, and most of the things that have happened in Paris have been the assailants have been people who've come from outside France into France. And now there are these so-called no-go areas in
Yes.
some parts of European countries, outside Brussels and in parts of outside Paris and other cities in Europe, and I think in England as well, which are getting more attention. And there have been shootings in England, though very few compared to what there's been here. But that to me suggests that there is something going on in society that is changing the way people interact with each other and what they think of as a possible activity that they didn't think of as a possible activity before. And this is exactly the sort of thing that I find particularly interesting about globalization. I think that the general quality of human life is changing. And I think that it's changing simply because we are the fact that we're interacting with more and more people as our lives become more and more globalized means that we see other people differently from the way we saw them when we were interacting only with a few people. And that would help to explain why this is happening more in a country with a population of 330 million than it is in European countries that have much smaller populations, because the actual arenas in which people interact may be smaller. Though this is the sort of thing that's very difficult to actually
Well, I think what's happened
straight.
is one of the byproducts of globalization has been the empowerment of the individual. And the individual, now that he or she is part of a global community, begins to recognize that they can in fact establish networks and begin to influence other people. And it's not that much of a hop, skip, and a jump from that kind of individual empowerment to deciding to, well, all right, I'm going to go get a gun and do something, especially when they see how this is glorified by the same factors of globalization, whether they be the news, the media, YouTube, et cetera, which have brought it to them in the first place.
No, I agree entirely, and you're thinking along the same lines as I am. I wouldn't use the word empowerment though, because I think that has all sorts of associations that may be misleading. Certainly, if you get a hold of a gun, you've got some sort of power that you don't have if you don't have a gun. But what I would draw attention to is the fact that in societies as it used to be, say 50 years ago, in every society, when you interacted with somebody you didn't know before, you would assess them probably subconsciously and know where they fitted into society in relation to the way you fitted into society. And that would tell you how you should behave in your interaction with them, whether it's on the street or in some public place or somebody you... and that's what's changed, I think, that now pretty much everything one does in public is negotiable. So it is empowerment in a sense, because it means that nothing of what we do in everyday life is actually determined by the way we were born into society or the way we've managed to engineer our lives up to the time that we're doing something.
I think that's a very good point. I think you're exactly right. And I think that affects everything. That affects a large part of the problem with education, for example, and that the students sitting on the other side of the teacher's desk view themselves as mini versions of the teacher. It affects the business world, where you have young people who are coming into business who believe that they have all the answers, and the whole idea of an apprenticeship and coming up the ladder is completely foreign to them.
And this other phenomenon that's been going on recently of people requiring, how do they call it? A safe place, so that freedom of speech is being threatened, especially in universities, but not only in universities, because nobody wants to hear anything that would be offensive to them. So the idea that, the idea of Hyde Park Corner, where anybody could go and spout about anything at all, however nonsensical or offensive it might be, which has a long history and was accepted in a society that was highly differentiated, where people knew their place in society and what they could expect in relation to what anybody else could expect, is now in a period of history where everything's supposed to be much freer and everybody's supposed to be much more equal, is now it's being suggested that shouldn't be allowed anymore. And that seems to me to be, in a way, the other side of the coin.
I'm not so sure that basically humans have changed so much, but that whole idea of protecting against people's sensitivities has been taken to new levels now. I mean, it used to be that people would understand that in interactions, either social or commercial interactions, you could get rubbed the wrong way, and it was not to be construed as a personal slight or an offense against your heritage or a judgment about your intellectual level. It just simply was a slight that comes from the fact that there's 6 billion people living on this planet. Get used to it. Now, people feel as if they can, I, I don't know, but I think you're right.
Well, the way I would finish this off, to the extent that, given that we're probably running out of time, is that we're in the habit, because we have a high respect for individualism. We think that's what modernity has given us and allowed us, and that we didn't have before. But partly also because of the general way science works. We think of human beings as individuals, and we study them as individuals. And any sort of research we do on the individual. But in fact, all of us are social, and we actually, in order to understand any particular human being, you've got to understand them in their social situation. Because if people's social situation goes wrong, they have nervous breakdowns.
Right.
They don't work. The social connections are as important a part of the individual as the biological mechanisms. And that's something that we don't pay any attention to, or at least not in a careful scientific way. And that's what's changing now, that we have to understand if we're going to be able to deal with these new problems.
Gigantic protruding symptom of increased globalization. It is the disruption of the social connection. You're correct. And you're right. And if that's the biggest symptom of it, and it's not being studied to a great extent, we're going to continue to have difficulties. Well,
I'm going to write a book on it.
All right, Professor. We'll talk next week and maybe move on from the forward and get to chapter 1. Thank you very much.
Bye. No, I've been thinking this afternoon that gradually all these things have been coming together. That's what I've got to do. I think I'm going to take a semester's leave and write a book.
Aspects? Okay.
Yeah, and why it's necessary to look at it now, why it's not been done before, and what it will tell us that we need to know. I've been thinking it out this afternoon. I'm going to work out when I can take time off from the university to find time to do it, because while I'm doing all the things I'm doing in the university, I can write a chapter here and an essay there and things like that, but a whole book.
Are you wrapped up now for the semester class-wise? Certainly, yes, right? Oh,
my last class is next Monday. No. And then my daughter and her boyfriend will come and visit us for Christmas on the 21st when the Nutcracker's over.
What do you think about that flooding in Chennai, India? Flooding in Chennai, yeah.
Flooding?
Yeah, it's down in the Madras. 269 people have been killed already. In Tamil Nadu state. Yeah, well, Modi was there earlier today, and the environmentalists are saying, yes, it's true that yesterday 14 inches of rain did fall in Chennai, which is a lot, and it's true that this is the worst rainfall in 100 years. But what's also true, the environmentalists are saying, is that they're permitting the creation of urban sprawl right in the middle of floodplains. They're paving over rivers and streams and ancient lake beds, and this is what to expect.
Yeah.
So,
well, the organization of that sort of thing in India is awful. But Madras is right along the beach, so I would think that the actual old city would be fine because if the
hold on, bear with me. No, just bear with me.
Is it Madurai?
Um, it's the city of Chennai, Chenai, and it's in the state of Tamil
That's
Nadu.
Madras is the
Okay, well that's what
Chennai
it is.
is the new name for Madras, but it must be in the the newly
Well,
built up
from
areas
an
outside
insurance
the old
perspective,
city, I
this is
think.
supposedly going to be akin to the Thai floods, because Ford, Hyundai, you name it, go right down the list. Everybody's over there, and everything's closed. It's going to remain closed for quite some time.
But
Well, all of these facilities
insurance
are going
works
to
in
be
India?
involved somehow in a supply chain process somewhere. So goods and services are not going to be delivered, as we learned in Thailand, when these hundreds of office parks were flooded, and nobody even really knew who was in them, tenant-wise, until it was discovered that many of these smaller suppliers made critical components for the automotive industry, and Toyota and Honda and even some of the American companies had to shut down their production lines for certain things for a period of several weeks.
I can imagine this sort of thing
Oh
is
yeah,
more
yeah. I mean, the
important to
mass
you than
killings, there's
mass
no
killing.
insurable, very little insurable interest. So you have to look at things differently. Ed, do you ever see McInerney over there?
Oh, no, I don't, because, well, I mean, our paths don't cross anywhere.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Because I'm
he's
in the
like
museum
600
and he's
yards
up
away.
in,
You guys should like get together. You could meet halfway,
well, I
one
don't know
way or
why he
the
doesn't
other.
come to the
Everybody
museum.
eventually
Everybody
does.
comes to the
Yes.
museum. No, we're
No,
redesigning
no.
all the galleries. Did I tell you that? We've just been interviewing design teams with their proposals this last couple of
My
days.
goodness.
It's going to be a 5-year project. And it will include McInerney as part of the museum
Well,
as well.
you
But
should
I won't have anything to do
you
with
should get
that.
him over there.
I'm just middle part.
All right.
Yeah, yeah. No, I should. Uh, maybe
I would
if
like
you
that.
come
I'd
down here
like to listen.
sometime,
I
we'll
sit
get
there like a
together.
bump on a log listening to the two of you guys, but I would like that. I'll do that. I promise you I will do that. I know I say this every week, but this time I will send an email within the next 24 hours to the both of you and start the ball in motion. All right, Brian. A pleasure as always.
Okay. Well, it's nice
I'm
to
on.
talk to you, and we
All
should
right,
be able
sir.
to meet
Take care.
next week.
All right, bye. Bye.
Okay.